Hi, welcome to the New Voting Project. My name is Kanal, your host, back at it again. And today we're here with Amir Badat, a litigator and voting rights advocate who graduated from Stanford University. You know, I'm from the Bay Area, so we appreciate the hustle. With a BA in International Relations, IR, and subsequently got a JD from New York University. Yeah, NYU, pretty dope shit. You've also had a multitude of experiences within politics. You've worked at the DNC. I won't spoil congratulations, celebrations. So I'll let you say where you're going to work next. But you have a strong emphasis on voter protections, and we're very pleased to have you with us. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Of course, I won't spoil the surprises. All right, this is so I guess just for our viewers, talk a little bit about your background, your experiences, how you kind of got from Stanford to voting rights. How was Stanford, by the way? Was it fun? Did it prepare you for your current responsibilities? Just some background on who you are.
Yeah. I appreciate the Bay Area Stanford repping that we got going on here.
Yeah. I don't go to Stanford. I'm not sponsored by them, but please accept my college application.
Right. You can
Much
submit this
obliged.
video with your college application.
Exactly. Much obliged.
Yeah, no, thank you again for having me. I'm excited to be here. Excited to talk to you tonight. Yeah, so I started out. I was born in Mississippi in a small town called Meridian. Born and raised there until I went off to college at Stanford. My parents, we were talking about this. My parents are of Gujarati origin. So my dad was born in India. My mom was born in Pakistan. And they somehow found themselves in Meridian, Mississippi, and that's where I was born. They own a small business. They own a motel. So I actually, I think this is actually fairly common among Gujarati Americans, but a lot of Gujaratis own motels and hotels. Are very prominent in the hospitality industry. So my family actually lived at the motel. So I grew up at the motel while my family was running it, which was a really interesting experience. And it really gave me an insight. I was lucky enough to grow up in a family that owned a small business, middle income lifestyle. But a lot of our customers and clientele were people who struggled with poverty, struggled with addiction, struggled with a lot of issues. So I was able to get some insight into kind of the challenges that are faced by people who have to deal with poverty. And it was a really interesting experience for me and really eye-opening experience, and it taught me a lot. And I think it really shaped me and kind of shaped the path that I wanted to take in the future. So after I graduated from high school in Mississippi, I went to Stanford, which was a big change. I hadn't spent a ton of time outside of Mississippi, so moving all the way to California it was quite a change, but it was really great. I loved Stanford. And you asked kind of how my college experience shaped what I'm doing today. And honestly, I majored in international relations. We learned about things like democracy and things like
I'd hope they teach you something about
right.
that.
Yeah, but it's all in a lot of your audience might relate to this as well. People who are in college, like a lot of the things that I learned was super, super theoretical. We're reading all of these, journal papers, and it's all very abstract. And really, what I think that I gained most out of my college experience was just learning from my classmates and my friends and the people that I went to school with. And a lot of people who were doing a ton of like really interesting things in fields that I had never even heard of. People who were doing things with tech and computer science and business and econ and things like that, that I was just like, wow, there's so much out there for me, that so much out there that I don't know, so much out there that people can do to make the world a better place. So I think that was really kind of what prepared me and really kind of opened my mind and made me super curious and interested in different things. So after I graduated from Stanford, I did a Coro Fellowship in the Bay Area, which is like a public service-oriented fellowship where we did placements in a bunch of different types of organizations. So
Right, right,
we
right.
did we did they're essentially like mini internships in like a business. I did an internship at a senator's office, Senator Barbara Boxer. I was in her
Really?
office for a little while. Yeah.
Barbara Buck.
Um,
So before Feinstein, I think.
what's that? They were in office at the same time.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Yeah.
but she retired before.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So that was really interesting. But it was cool because we got to get experience doing projects in a bunch of different sectors that really kind of taught us how the world operates.
Right.
So, like, worked on a local campaign, worked in the senator's office, worked at the Port of Oakland. Just really gave us kind of a good understanding of how things relate to each other, and that really made me interested in like public administration and the law. I went to law school at NYU, which was also a great experience. I really, a lot of people who go to law school probably disagree, but I enjoyed law school. I thought it was fun, learned a lot. And then after law school, I went to work at a law firm here in New York, which was good. I learned a lot of skills, a lot of litigation skills. I clerked after that for a federal judge in New York, and then went back to a different law firm, the one that I'm actually at right now called Patterson Belknap. Did commercial litigation, but also on the side did a ton of kind of voting rights work. And we can talk a little bit more about how I got into that.
Yeah, yeah. Let's save the meat for next course.
Yeah, so did a bunch of voting rights work, and now I've been doing that for a few years, and now I'm actually going to start a new job in a couple of weeks at the NAACP Legal Defense and Education Fund,
Yeah,
which I'm really,
surprise.
really excited about. I'm going to be
Yeah.
doing voting rights work there, so
When
yeah,
are
I'm
they going to
super.
hire me? Is the real question. Look, I don't have a law degree, but I can get one. Uh,
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, you
exactly.
don't need a law degree to work there.
Exactly. I don't need one. I'm sure they'd prefer it. Um, but I guess why voting rights? Of
Yeah.
all the things you could choose, you talked about public administration, you talked about working for senators. I mean, there's so much that goes into policy and leadership, but why voting rights specifically? What drew you to that?
Yeah, so growing up in Mississippi, we learned a lot about the civil rights movement, and I was also
Mm,
always super, super inspired by kind of all of the Mississippi heroes that we learned about that made such a huge difference in the state and across the country. But I think really what drew me to voting rights was an experience a few years ago working on a campaign down in Mississippi. I was on their voter protection team, and part of my job was to answer calls from voters who either had questions about voting or had problems with voting or weren't able to vote for one reason or another. And through that experience, I'd heard a ton of stories from people about how difficult it was for them to actually cast their ballots. One story that really stood out to me was we got a call from an elderly black woman who lived in a really small town in
yeah,
Mississippi, and she said that she got a call that day from someone she didn't know who it was, but they were asking her who she was going to vote for. She was super proud about the candidate that she was going to vote for, so she was like, "I'm going to vote for so and so." And then the person who called her said, "Okay, great. Thank you so much for letting us know. You can consider this as your vote. You don't have to go to the polling place on election day and cast your ballot." So essentially, what they were trying to do is prevent people from going and voting. And she knew better, so she called us and she told us about it. But I'm sure that there were hundreds of people that got that call, and as a result, didn't go to the polling place on election day and vote. And listening to her explain this and listening to how the experience affected her, you can really sense that like she felt that something was being taken away from her. A really fundamental right was being taken away from her. And we had so many calls that were similar to that, especially from elderly folks who in Mississippi, these were folks that had lived through the civil rights movement. They had experienced the trauma and the violence of the battle for voting rights at the time. And hearing these stories about how it's still so difficult for people to cast their ballot, that really kind of struck a chord with me and made me feel like I gotta get up and do something.
Right. No, I've damn, that's
Yeah, that's how I
I've
felt.
I've never had I mean that's like voter manipulation. I mean, geez, I mean, I'm sure there's some laws. I'm not a lawyer, so I defer to you, but
Oh yeah, no, there definitely are. But I mean, there were a lot of stories like that. Like
uh,
you hear stories about billboards going up that are advertising the date of the election a week after the election is actually being held.
wow.
So all sorts of misinformation and things like that that really serve to disenfranchise folks.
Yeah. Well, that adds an extra layer to, I guess, the voting rights restrictions that we're seeing legally passed in some states.
Right.
In some ways, I mean, this is just blatant, you know, disenfranchisement. But I guess in cases you're talking about, I mean, that was like almost subverting, very secretly, kind of manipulating voting,
Yeah.
which is, I guess, historically been a trend. But in other ways, you could say it's all blatant. They were doing this on purpose. But we'll get to that. I want to circle back to the year 2020, a very interesting year. You spent, I believe, several months working for the DNC, the Democratic National Convention. Um, Tell me about that. What was the DNC like? You were in their voting protections agency, I believe, something of
Yep.
that sort. How was that experience? What did you focus on in key states? Georgia, of course, there was a big runoff election. Walk me through what the DNC was like when voting was at its height, when there was a presidential election, top to bottom ballots being passed in every state. What was
Yeah.
that like?
It was crazy. It was really crazy. Yeah, I was the senior counsel for voter protection for the DNC for the last few months before the election, and then a month or so after the election.
Mhm.
And really, my primary responsibility was working with state parties to help them develop and implement their voter protection programs. So, historically, the way voter protection has worked within the Democratic Party infrastructure is that it's usually a voter protection program is usually rolled out through a state party or a coordinated campaign, or in states that don't have a coordinated, then just the top of the ticket in that state for that election. So we worked really closely with state parties to help them develop their programs, make sure that they had the necessary resources, make sure that they had the necessary expertise, which has all been developed by the DNC over several election cycles. So it was a lot of fun. We worked with 30 plus states. It was the largest voter protection program in the history of the Democratic Party.
Wow.
More resources were devoted to this voter protection effort than had ever been devoted in previous elections by the Democrats. And obviously, it was necessary because we had on the other side a massive effort by the Trump campaign and the Republican Party to really subvert the election and to erect obstacles all over the country for people to vote. So it was a battle. It was really really
Yeah, I
uh,
think it was one of many battles in this war that we're in.
yeah. Oh yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
not just a war between parties. I mean, we're at war for our civil rights. I mean, we're talking about a party, and I can be partisan. I don't know about you.
Yeah, not in 2 weeks.
Yeah, not in 2 weeks, right? But I mean, we have a party that is overtly subverting national elections. I had a gubernatorial recall. I don't know if you heard. I mean, it's pretty famous.
Yeah, no,
There's a
yeah,
recall.
I think I heard about that.
Exactly, right? I mean, we had candidates who were already calling for voter fraud and
Yeah,
speculation prior to the results even coming out. I mean, that's
yeah,
crazy. And Governor Newsom actually recently signed a bill saying, everybody will be sent an absentee ballot going forward. So obviously, the Democrats are doing something about it. But I mean, it's abhorrent. It's very, I guess, it forces me to come to a conclusion that at the fundamental root of all democracy, all democratic institutions, any policy we pass, it starts with our vote. I think that often gets blurred between the lines. Some people are issue based, some people are candidate based, other people just really love to watch CNN at night, and some folks really don't care. But what I always emphasize to people is that voting is so central. It's premised on everything we do. You want that land post fixed? You got to vote for your mayor. You want to
Right.
make sure an infrastructure bill is passed so we're in the 21st century? Well, you got to vote for Joe Biden. And I'm not endorsing any candidates. I'm just saying voting is slightly more significant. And if it wasn't, the counter argument is, then why is the other side so
Right.
focused on ensuring that
Right.
we don't have that right?
Right. No, I totally agree with you. I mean, it is really the core of our democracy. Our ability to vote, our right to vote, is at the core of our democracy. And not only do we have people today fighting tooth and nail to try to make it harder to vote. We had an entire civil rights movement where people literally died for the right to vote. So there's really a ton at stake, and it just highlights the importance of the right, to access the ballot box. And I'm glad that you mentioned local elections, because I feel like people really neglect
They downplay.
local elections.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they. I mean, I say this on practically every episode. If you ever watch this podcast, at least you know local elections are of the utmost importance.
oh yeah, it's where it's at.
They are making the leading decisions. As much as I love to pay attention to national highlights and politics and who's not doing this and Senator Joe Manchin and reconciliation, I love that. I'm a
Right.
political junkie, but when it comes to things that need to be passed, criminal justice reform and police budgets and zoning and propositions on your state ballot and where's the money actually going, that all happens locally. Everything,
Yeah.
everything from your city council, mayor, DA, board of supervisors, state senators, state assembly folk, it all happens where you live, in your
Yep.
state legislator. So, but who am I? I
No,
mean, just a
I
couple
agree with you.
thoughts.
Hey,
Yeah.
I'm with you, and you're really seeing the effects of it too. Um, this year, next, you're going to see with redistricting, because redistricting, so many states are going to have so
Shift.
many.
Yeah.
Yeah, so many states are controlled by one party, and their legislatures are going to be responsible for redistricting. And now partisan gerrymandering has kind of been signed off by the Supreme Court. So we're going to see some really uh, extreme partisan gerrymandering happen. And a lot of the reason why so many of these legislatures are or so many states are single party states now is because of local elections, and people have not been paying enough attention to local elections.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's really important.
Yeah. It's I was talking with somebody today, I always have to believe in that life is good, or can be, because you can become so disengaged, so apathetic so quickly if you truly analyze and even listen to the I guess the modern vernacular. Everybody's politicized.
Right.
Everybody I know. I mean, it doesn't matter if you're like my age, young, getting into it. Even folks who can't even vote, like all my peers, or maybe adults, like it's across the board. Folks are so tired,
Yeah.
very, very fatigued, very exhausted, and in most cases alienated. They don't want to pay attention, and that comes with a lot of consequences. That's my inspirational sermon for.
I'm inspired. I'm
Exactly.
ready to go
See,
fight.
see, exactly. So on that note, we see in Georgia, you brought up gerrymandering, and this is a very interesting topic. You brought up a Supreme Court precedence. I want talk about that. Talk about why gerrymandering kind of happens, and what it has eventually led to, which is our current kind of hyper polarization. So bring me in, bring me to speed. Talk to me
Yeah.
like I was in kindergarten.
Yeah. So um, every 10 years we have the census.
Yes.
The census is basically, counting every single person in the country. That's the goal, to count every single person in the country. And the reason that we do the census, there are a bunch of reasons. One is, allocation of resources, budgeting, that type of stuff, at the federal level. But we also do the census because we have to reapportion and redistrict our legislative districts across the country, and that's both that's at every single level. At the local level, your school boards, your city councils, at the state level, your state legislatures, and at the federal level, so your congressional seats. All of the maps of those districts are going to be redrawn this year and next year. And we're going to have a lot of litigation that's going to extend it much beyond next year. So this process happens every 10 years, and in many states, the entity that's responsible for doing that is the state legislature. We're starting to see some states move towards what are called independent redistricting commissions or bipartisan redistricting commissions,
Yes.
but in the majority of states, the state legislature is still responsible for that.
Just
So,
Bay Area context, my county is actually independent redistricting commission.
yeah,
I believe there's an age cap 18, so I wasn't able to join, but we do have that in some states, although I'm very blue. Do continue.
yeah. No, it's interesting. That it's actually a very interesting trend that we're starting to see kind of what the effects are now. But that's another conversation. So what we're seeing is that state legislatures what you're seeing is literally legislators are drawing the lines of their own districts. So obviously, they have certain incentives. They have certain interests to make sure that they stay in their seats. They want to make sure that they don't get ousted. They don't lose a re-election campaign. So they want to make their seats very safe. They also want to maximize their political parties' power and representation within the legislature, both at the state and the federal level. So the ways that they do that are called gerrymandering. And gerrymandering is essentially there are a couple different forms of gerrymandering, but what it is it's essentially drawing the lines in such a way as to favor one group over another. So you have partisan gerrymandering, which is where one party is drawing the lines to favor that party over another party. So you have some really horrendous gerrymanders that we've seen all over the country. There were some really bad ones in Pennsylvania, some really bad ones in North Carolina, where you see like districts that are being drawn like all really really crazy shapes,
Right.
and they're like trying to exclude certain neighborhoods so that you don't have uh,
Too
Democrats in
blue
this
or
neighborhood.
too red. I've seen it. Seen those
Yeah,
maps.
yeah,
You look at those maps; they're crazy. And they're in states like Georgia right now, they're trying to redo it because they saw Fulton County. They know how well it did, so they're trying to divide it up. But yeah, do continue.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, so that partisan gerrymandering is favoring one party over another. The Supreme Court in 2019, in a case called Rousseau versus Common Cause, held that partisan gerrymandering claims, so claims that are being brought in federal court to challenge partisan gerrymanders, are not justiciable, which means that essentially federal courts won't hear those claims. So that decision
Oh,
has
that's a
kind of
whole bunch of BS. Yeah,
I agree.
that's
Um,
come on. Are you kidding
yeah,
me? It is literally defining our federal leadership, state leadership, and maybe they're pulling the states' right argument. Let the states handle it, but that's so BS.
it essentially came down to the argument that a court doesn't really have a method to judge how unconstitutional a partisan gerrymander is. I think it's a very flawed opinion, but it's the law that we have now. So that what it means is that there are going to be just blatant and explicit partisan gerrymanders all across the country in this redistricting cycle. We're not legislators are not going to try to hide their partisan gerrymanders. They can explicitly say, we're drawing these lines to maximize Republican power. We're drawing these lines to maximize Democratic power. And that's totally okay. There are some state laws, state constitutions, for example, in Pennsylvania, that could provide the basis for claims, and we've seen some successful claims being brought under state constitutional grounds. But that might not be possible. It's not going to be possible across the entire country. So that's one of the big kind of things that we're dealing with this cycle. You're starting to see maps being proposed in states like Texas, where You have, I think, just yesterday or the day before, you the maps that were proposed were hugely partisan, hugely partisan, and this is just an example of kind of where we're at now with the Rousseau decision.
Yeah, no, I'm just glad we aren't in a government shutdown today. So, you know, I'm
Yeah,
like,
I guess we got to count our blessings.
yeah, exactly. Especially for those federal employees, they work very hard. I just want to echo that.
Oh, for sure.
Our federal employees are probably the most overworked. They're basically keeping the country's leadership afloat,
Absolutely.
and we treat them so terribly. But anyway, voting rights, yeah, that's good too. Um, I just want to, ask, what can we be doing, in states like California, states like Pennsylvania, Georgia? What can we be doing to help the cause? I think that's what most folks want answered. Sure, you laid out the problem. Sure, you told me here are the solutions, but what can I actually do to make sure it happens? What's the actionable? What's the enforceable? Maybe we're not all great lawyers and NAACP legal fund like you, but what can we be doing to support our values?
Yeah. I mean, I think number one, and this is, I guess, the most obvious one, but you can go out and vote. Voting is kind of the fundamental way that we express our preferences in this country, and there are barriers to voting. That's kind of what my entire job is about, is to help reduce those barriers. But that there are still, um, that is still our best way to affect outcomes and to make sure that our preferences are expressed. So I think number one is voting. Number two is to stay engaged and to make sure that you're staying apprised of things that are going on in your state, things that are going on in your city, and make your voice heard in other ways. There's so many different ways for us to get involved and for us to make our voices heard. You can go to city council meetings, you can go to local school board meetings, you can make public comment at all of these things. You
Three
can,
minutes.
was that?
I said 3 minute public comment. Robert.
Exactly, 3 minutes.
Yeah.
That's all it takes, 3 minutes. And I know people can talk for way more than 3 minutes. So, like that's a great way for you to get out there and make your voice heard. Also, talk to your friends about the stuff. Like, I know a bunch of my friends who are not necessarily politically engaged, but they still care about things. They still care about things that affect their day-to-day lives, and they still care about their kids or their parents or their grandparents, things that affect their lives. So if you can talk to folks and really connect how the things that are happening at your local city council meetings or the things that are happening in the Senate or in the White House actually affect their lives, like that does a lot to get other people engaged and involved in the process. So yeah, those are a few ways that I think would be great to get involved.
Yeah, and then at the end, go to Stanford, get a law degree, and you'll be fine. Something like
Easy,
that.
easy.
Right. So no, thank you for that sound advice. I just want to. How can folks stay updated on your platform? What you do with, I guess, will do with the NAACP. If you want to shout out your social medias or anything.
Yeah, I'm on Instagram. I'm not super active. I got like 3 posts, but I do stories and things on Instagram at Amir Badat.
You're not on Twitter?
I'm not on Twitter actually. I need to get on Twitter.
Dude,
I
how can
know.
you be in
I know.
politics and not be on Twitter? You know,
I know.
before I ask folks to come on the show, I should verify they have Twitter, because this has happened to me in the past. One other person on this show said she didn't have Twitter, and anyway, get Twitter, please.
Yeah, I need to get Twitter. That I'm gonna do that right after I get off.
Yes, and first follow is me.
My first follow,
Yeah,
yeah.
and in the description, just write dedicated to, my Twitter. Much
Yeah,
appreciated.
yeah.
But no, do that, and you're always welcome back on the show. I
Thank you.
understand, you're on the East Coast. Got some hefty work to do. But you're always welcome back. Please let us know how the new job works out, and
Thank you.
keep fighting the good fight. It's
Yeah,
because of
thank
folks
you.
like you.
Thanks for having me on, and thanks for doing this show. This is such a great platform for you to have people talk and connect with other young folks. So thank you for doing this.
Of course. And yeah, if the NAACP wants to sponsor me, you have my number. Give me a call anytime. Would appreciate that. Other than that, thank you for your unique perspective, and I wish you the best of luck.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Take care, Emma.
Take care. Bye.